Hello and welcome to my channel. Today's tutorial is for another of the triangle scarves that can also be used as a shawl. The one that I'm going to make today is done with an Aran weight yarn and a slightly bigger hook. It's a 6.5mm. It means that the shawl will grow quite quickly. You'll be able to make one in probably half the time that you made the other one, and there's less rows to the pattern. We're using double crochets, chains and treble clusters, and I'll show you how to do those. So for this particular scarf we're going to start with a chain of 4. I'm going to leave a little bit of an end so that I can work that in afterwards. So to do a chain, it's just yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and yarn over, pull through. We're now going to work into the first chain of these 4, and I'm going to work another with the 3 chains that we've got here are going to count as the first stitch. So yarn over into that last chain, pick up a loop, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. That now counts as the first double. So we've got the 3 chain and then 1 double. We're going to do another 3 so that we've got 5 stitches all together. One, 2 and 3. You'll find that the chain will sort of stretch a little bit, but we can always pull it tight and then fasten off the tail of the yarn. We can work that in. We're now going to work 2 chain, and that's going to be the point of the triangle. So then back into this original stitch here we're going to do 5 doubles. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. As you can see, the chains become quite stretched, but we can just pull that end tight and it's going to tighten it off. Each row is going to start exactly the same. We're going to work 3 chain to count as a stitch and 2 doubles into this first stitch. We're also going to increase on the last stitch by working 3 doubles into that last one. So 3 chain is the first stitch, so we flip over and work another 2 doubles into that same chain, into that same stitch. So we've got 3 stitches in one. We're going to just work 1 double all the way down to the point. On this row we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. That brings us down now to the 2 chain space, and we're going to work 1 double, 2 chain and 1 double all into that same 2 chain space. We're going to work now 1 double into each of the stitches up to the last stitch. On this first row it'll be 4 doubles. So we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. That brings us to the 3 chain that we started that row with, and we're going to work into the third of those chains. We're going to work 3 doubles, and that gives us the increase at the other side. We're going to do that on each row, that we'll work 3 stitches into the first stitch and then again 3 stitches into the last stitch. Into this middle 2 chain space here we're always going to work 1 double, 2 chain and 1 double. So we're ready to start the next row. The next row is exactly the same as the row that we've just worked. So we've got 3 chain followed by 2 doubles, and then working 1 double into each stitch down to the 2 chain space. And you can actually see on this one already how quick the scarf is going to grow. So we've got a double into that last double, and then we're going to work 1 double, 2 chain and a second double into the 2 chain space, and then 1 double into each of the doubles coming back up until we get to the last stitch, and again we're going to work 3 doubles into that final stitch. So I'll just pull that out because I've only caught the 1 loop, and it will work better if it's through the 2. And then the final stitch here, we're going to work 3 doubles into that last stitch. Just work into the top chain with 1, 2, and 3. And you can see already using a variegated yarn is giving us a nice finish as well to the pattern. Each row from now is just going to be a repeat, so this next row is the first row of the repeat. Instead of doing the 3 chain into the first stitch, we're going to do 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is going to count as the first treble. We're now going to do another 2 trebles into that same stitch so that we've carried on with the increase at each side. So to do a treble, yarn over twice, into the stitch, pick up a loop, yarn over through 2 once, yarn over through 2 twice, and yarn over through 2 3 times. We're going to do that again into this next stitch. So where we had the 3 stitches in the previous row, we've again got 3 stitches in this first stitch. We're going to chain 1, then we're going to skip the next stitch and work a treble cluster into the following stitch. So yarn over twice, into the stitch, pick up a loop, yarn over through 2 once, yarn over through 2 twice, but we don't do the 3rd yarn over. Going to yarn over twice again, into that same stitch, pick up a loop, and do the same again, yarn over through 2 once, yarn over through 2 twice. We've now got 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over twice, into the stitch a 3rd time, pick up a loop, yarn over through 2 once, yarn over through 2 twice. We've now got 4 loops on the hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on the hook, and that's formed the first treble cluster. Going to chain 1 to fasten off the cluster and a chain 1. We're now going to skip the next stitch and work a treble cluster into this next one. Yarn over twice, wrap round twice, into the stitch, pick up a loop, through 2 once, through 2 twice, and then again exactly the same, yarn over through 2 once, yarn over through 2 twice, 4 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 4 and a chain to finish plus a chain 1. So we've now got 2 of the clusters. We're going to carry on all the way down to the bottom exactly the same way, skipping a stitch and then working the treble cluster. Don't forget the chain 1 to fasten off, and then a chain 1. Then we skip a stitch and work into the next stitch and work another treble cluster. And then a chain 1. We've now come to the last stitch before the 2 chain space, and again we're going to do a treble cluster into that stitch. Chain 1 to fasten off the stitch and chain 1. We're now back to the 2 chain space here at the point, and we're going to work exactly as we did before, a treble into the space followed by 2 chain and another treble into that same space. So now working up the other side of the V, we're going to chain 1, then we're going to work a cluster into this first stitch. Again, it's a treble cluster as we did before. Chain 1 to fasten off the cluster and chain 1. Skip a stitch. We're going to do exactly the same into the next stitch. We're going to do this all the way back up this other side. Chain 1 to fasten off and a chain 1, and then skip the next stitch and work a cluster into the following stitch. So we're working the cluster into each alternate stitch, skipping the just 1 stitch in between. Chain 1 to fasten off and chain 1, and then into the next stitch we work another treble cluster, pull through all the loops, chain 1 to fasten off and a chain 1. We skip a stitch, we're going to go into this next stitch and work the last treble cluster into that stitch. Chain 1 to fasten off and chain 1. We now skip a stitch as we did before, and we're on to this last 3 chain from the previous row. We're going to work 3 trebles into that last stitch. Oops. These are 3 normal trebles, not the treble cluster. There we've got 2, and the third one is 3. So we've now formed the row with the treble clusters on there. I'm going to flip over, and we're back now to a double crochet row. We're going to do this one slightly different because we're going to work a front post double around the top of each of these clusters. But as always, we're going to start with the 3 stitches in the first stitch. So we've got 3 chain, that counts as your first stitch, plus 2 doubles, so that each beginning stitch has got 3 stitches in. We're going to do a double into each of these trebles, and then we work a double into the chain space. we're now going to work a front post double around the top of this cluster. So we yarn over, insert the hook into the space, go behind the stitch and pick up a loop, bring to the front, yarn over through two, yarn over through two, and then we do one double into the chain space, and we're going to do a front post double around the cluster, a double into the chain space and a front post double around the cluster. Just carry on all the way down to the two chain space, and you can pull the clusters forward a little bit. That actually gives them a little pop, so that they actually stand proud of the scarf. So we've got down to the two trebles that formed the V on the last stitch. This time we're going to work one double into the treble, and then we're going to increase in that two chain space with one double, two chain and one double. We're going to work a double into the treble and a double into the chain space. Then we're going to work exactly the same as we did coming down this side. We're going to work exactly the same going back up the other side. So the next stitch is a front post double, and then we do a double into the chain space, a front post double, a double into the chain space, and so on until we get to the other side. And again, on the very last stitch we're going to do as we did before and work 3 stitches into the final stitch. Just work up to that point. Double in that last chain space, and then we've got the 3 trebles from the previous row. We're going to do one double into each of the first 2. There's 1 and 2, and then as before we're going to do 3 doubles into that last stitch. 1, 2 and 3. So there we've got the pattern repeat. We've got 3 rows that we started off with, but then we start on the actual pattern repeat itself. So we've got the row of the treble clusters followed by the row with the front post doubles around the cluster and the doubles in between. So the next 2 rows are going to be just doubles all the way along, not forgetting that we need to have 3 stitches in the first stitch and 3 stitches in the last, and down here on the 2 chain space we're going to have 1 double, 2 chains and 1 double. I'll work the next row of doubles and I'll meet you when I've done, I'll do the next 2 rows of the doubles, and I'll meet you when we get to that point. Start it off again on camera. So we've got 3 chain, counts as the first double, flip over and 2 doubles into that same space. And then this row is nice and easy, where it's just 1 double in each stitch all the way down to the V. Got a little knot in the yarn there. So just 1 straightforward double in each stitch. pause your video until you've worked your doubles down to the 2 chain space. In that 2 chain space it's exactly the same as before. 1 double, 1 chain and 1 double, and then we're going to work a double in each stitch all the way back up, and then the following row is going to be exactly the same. 1 double in each stitch, not forgetting the 3 stitches at the beginning and the end, and the double with 2 chains and a double down in the 2 chain space. So I'll meet you when you get to the end of your second row of doubles. So after the 2 rows with the doubles, this is what the work will look like, and we're now ready to start the next row of treble clusters. So again, exactly the same as before, we're going to work 4 chain because we're starting with trebles, flip over, and we'll do 2 more trebles into that first stitch. We're going to chain 1, we're going to skip the next stitch and work the treble cluster into the following stitch. Chain 1 to finish off the cluster and chain 1. Skip the next stitch and we're going to work the treble cluster into the next one. We're going to carry on exactly the same as we did on the previous cluster row, where we're going to work all the way down to the 2 chain space, skipping a stitch after each cluster, and then into the 2 chain space at the bottom. Here we're going to work 1 treble, 2 chains and 1 treble. So I'll let you work your cluster row all the way along this row and I'll meet you at the other side. Point to note, on some of the rows when you get down to the 2 chain space there will be a final stitch. We don't work into that stitch at all, we just do the chain 1 and we still just work the 1 treble with 2 chain and another treble into that chain space. If we skipped the stitch at this side of the point, we're also going to skip the first stitch after the point on the other side. So we'll still do the chain 1 and then we'll skip this stitch and work the next cluster into the following stitch. Once you've worked the pattern repeat, you might wonder what sort of a length you want to do your scarf. I usually find that if you hold this long side of the scarf here across your own body, if it reaches from one hand all the way across with your arms outstretched to the other side, that's usually going to be long enough. Again, you might want to add tassels, some people add pom-poms, but you don't have to add anything at all onto these scarves if you just want to leave the ends plain as they are. I do tend to make a tassel for the end of mine. That's quite easy to do. I think a tassel's easier sometimes to make than a pom-pom. I think it just finishes off. I also put the same onto the V as well. If I'm making 2 tassels, I would put a tassel on the V as well. So I'll see you when you get up to the end of this cluster row. Worked the final cluster. Again, we're going to work 3 trebles into the top of the 3 chains to keep the increase right. 2 and 3. So the next row, as before, is going to be doubles, and we're going to work the front post double around each of the clusters. So we start with 3 chain and work 2 doubles into that same stitch. We're going to work a double into each of the next 2, a double into the chain space, and then a front post double around the top of the cluster, a double into the chain space, and a front post double around that next cluster. You just carry on all the way down to the 2 chain space, where again you're going to work 1 double, 2 chain and 1 double, and that's the whole of the pattern repeat. So once you've done this row with the front post doubles, it's just a repeat then of the 2 rows of doubles, the row of clusters, and then the row of the doubles with the front post double around the top of the cluster. And you just carry on until your scarf is the size that you want it, and then if you want it to, you can just leave the edge as it is, or you could do a row of singles around. You could do a shell pattern along the edge if you wanted to make it fancier, and as I say, you can finish it off with tassels or pom-poms. One that I've got here, you can see that I've done a tassel on the V and also one on the end of each side as well. To make a pom-pom, it's really simple. You just wrap the yarn around a credit card and then just tie off the top, snip all the ends, and you've got quite an easy tassel there. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.